Hello, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I hope you are all doing well. Apologies for not uploading last week with Easter weekend, and I went away with family. It was hard to find the time to record, but we are back, and we are better than ever, and we are back with a very interesting topic. And I know I say this every episode, but genuinely, this podcast is just everything I needed. I'm so glad I started because every single week I just get to talk about something that really interests me, and I get to, do some research before recording, and I don't know, it's just amazing, having that feeling of bringing yourself more knowledge, and especially about a topic that influences your daily life. Anyways, I'm going to try not to rant. For today, I have a title, but it's kind of long, so I think I will still change it. For now, it's For the Ones Who Want It All, Navigating a Life Full of Curiosity, Hobbies, and Dreams. So I think it's too long, isn't it? I think it's too long, but it paints a nice picture to start this episode. I think this topic is so interesting. It kind of ties into my last episode as well, where we talked all about, having so many different interests and why we can't stick anything out. We always want to try something new, things like that. But today, so interesting. We are talking about wanting to do so much with life. You have only one life, and why should we not try and do everything we're interested in? But it can be overwhelming as well. For example, when I make my workout program, when I make a new one, I want to incorporate running and other types of cardio and swimming and weightlifting and Pilates and yoga and who knows what else. There is just so much to try, and that's only my sport life. I want to travel to so many different places. I have so many skills I want to master, hobbies I want to have. It all gets a bit much, and it can also make it discouraging and can make it so that we end up doing nothing because we want to do so much. It's just this huge mountain to climb. And so today we are going to talk all about that. So let me give you a quick overview of what we're going to get into today. It's not a very different structure than we normally do, so I'm going to keep it quite brief, but just so you know what you're in for. So first, just a quick introduction. Not going to keep that too long because I think you're all here for the sciencey goodness and everything for the podcast. So our first science that we're going to get into is psychology and philosophy as well, actually. So psychology and philosophy and the roots of wanting to do so much. We're going to get into the Renaissance. We are going to get into FOMO, into existentialism. It's going to be absolutely great. And then after, we are going to get into neuroscience. If you're a listener of the podcast, we have to get into neuroscience. Let's be so for real. Why our brain struggles with infinite options and feeling like we have so much we want to do and where that comes from. I always think that if we have a so-called problem, it's always nice to know where it comes from so we can really, solve the problem instead of just the symptoms, So philosophy, psychology, and then neuroscience, and then we're going to tie that off with a few historical examples because I am the daughter of two historians, okay? If I see any type of way I can incorporate history, it's in my blood, what can I say? And then, of course, as always, we are going to tie it off with our actionable steps, our practical strategies for those multi-passionate souls out there. For any new listeners, I, in every single episode, include some type of actionable portion because the aim of this podcast is not just to listen and forget, right? So many times we listen to podcasts, we read books, we consume any type of medium, really. And then we move on to the next. And nothing really changed. How interesting it could have been, So I always try to have some type of actionable steps or some kind of practical way to implement what we talked about into your life. So, you can really leave this episode as a little bit better of a human, hopefully. We'll see. Okay, that might be a little bit of a high standard for myself, but yeah, that's the plan for today. I'm excited. I hope you are too. And let's quickly introduce the topic before we can get into the sciencey goodness. Okay, so as I said, the introduction, we are going to keep it quite short, but I wanted to kind of put the topic on a scale and view the two sides of the coin about how beautiful it can be to be multi-passionate and to want to do and experience so many things. And the other side of the coin would be that it's sometimes also a burden. As I said, it can be hard and it can be, a mountain to climb and everything. So yeah, being a multi-passionate person is definitely a gift. But like I said, it can easily tip into overwhelm and decision fatigue and just dissatisfaction with life. As I said, sometimes we end up doing nothing at all. Even though there's so much we want to do, it feels like too much and we don't know where to start. And that can be very hard. But yeah, in today's age, opportunities seem endless, right? We can travel anywhere. I mean, before planes existed, there was just no way. I mean, you could get to another continent with a boat, but it would take so long and, it would be quite dangerous as well. So right now we can just travel anywhere. We can master every hobby. There is a tutorial somewhere out there on the internet. And we can consume infinite information, and not only in books, but as I said, the internet. And it can be very overwhelming. And I think if you're a multi-passionate person, you just see all of these things and you're just like, wow, life is beautiful and I want to experience it to the fullest. And especially if there is so much out there, it can be a struggle. So it's actually a phenomenon studied deeply in psychology in Barry Schwartz's book, The Paradox of Choice. And basically what it says is that when we have too many options, when we have too many choices, it can make us less satisfied because whatever we choose, there is so much we feel like we left out. And that's why I think a lot of multi-passionate people never end up actually starting and committing to something, because they feel that if they put their energy into one thing, they can't put it into the other thing and it's a loss. But in the end, they don't put their energy in any of the things they want to do, or they half-ass it and then all the energy is lost. So how do we find that balance? How do we make those choices? How can we make this easier and more enjoyable for ourselves? That was the quick introduction of the topic. If you can't tell, I'm excited, but I'm always excited, aren't I? So yeah, as I said, our first topic is psychology and philosophy. So we're going to get into FOMO, the Renaissance, even existentialism. It's gonna be awesome. Okay, I'm setting high standards for myself this episode, but I'm telling you now, it's going to be awesome. We are going to learn, so let's get into it. Okay, so for the psychological and philosophical roots of the issue we are discussing today, first I wanted to get into FOMO. And I think everyone kind of knows what FOMO is, right? It's the fear of missing out. And when we look at where FOMO comes from, it's actually from the idea and the value that most humans have is that we don't want to live an unlived life, if that makes sense. We don't want to imagine ourselves looking back and thinking, oh my God, I didn't do anything with my life. I quote unquote wasted it. That is just like a fear that a lot of people have. And FOMO actually comes from that, because we feel, especially if we get back to the issue of today and we see so many options of things we want to do, it can feel as if we choose one option, we miss out on all of the others, right? It's kind of what I said in the introduction in the paradox of choice. It can feel overwhelming, and we can feel like there's so much we want to do and so many lives to live and so many experiences that it can be hard to choose one, because you feel like you give up on all the others, which isn't necessarily the case, but we're going to get into that. So again, it wouldn't be an Avenly episode without me complaining about social media. I'm not a social media hater, actually. Let me clear that up. But we do see from multiple studies that social media magnifies FOMO by showcasing endless possibilities, right? You have to spend only like 10 minutes on TikTok and you see some people traveling to the other side of the world and now you want to go there. You see people sewing their own clothes and now you want to try to sew because why not? How hard could it be? You see people recommending books or skincare or whatever, and you are just exposed to so many options and you feel, oh, I need to do that. Oh, that's interesting. I could try that. And in some way, all of these choices and all of these possibilities and all of these things we want to try, they are rooted from our FOMO. And that is a very interesting concept to me, because I always just thought, oh, it's inspiring, you know? But it's just that we don't want to look back on our life and think, well, I could have sewn my own clothes, but I didn't. Well, I could have read those books, but I didn't. Well, you know, you get the point. It's hard. And when we compare that, I'm already going a bit into the historical perspective. Forgive me. But when we look at the Renaissance and Leonardo da Vinci, for example, he embodied the Renaissance man. And I see it go around on social media as well, like that polymath approach. It's like you are mastering so many different things. For example, Leonardo da Vinci, he was obviously skilled in art and science and engineering. And what is important to note is that we might think that this is a very great man, and he was, by the way, but he lived in a slower world. Today's pace of information is exponentially faster. If you look at studies coming out, books coming out, or even in TikToks being posted, there are like so many things coming to us every second of every single day, and it's a lot. It's a lot. It's not just that we still have books from a long time ago, and now we have more books, but we expanded this into the internet, and it's crazy. It's crazy how much information is out there. And I just really wanted to make note of that, because a lot of people compare themselves to Leonardo da Vinci now that, you know, like the Renaissance man and the polymath and everything that's very popular. People compare themselves to that, but we live in a completely different world, and that's very, very important to grasp. Sometimes what we see also is because we have so much information, we can get very deep into a topic as well. You know, we want to master it. And, you know, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I want to make sure that, you know, I really get it and I really understand it and it's perfect, you know. But what we see is that can actually lead to dissatisfaction and even unhappiness. So there is this research by Herbert Simon. Again, every single episode I say this. If I butcher names, I'm trying my best, okay? But it's actually quite old bit of research. It's from 1956. And he discusses satisficers and maximizers. So what is the difference between the two? Well, the maximizer seeks the quote-unquote best choice and wants to do it perfectly. And they want to ensure that they get the most out of the choices they make, right? They actually end up miserable often. They end up miserable. But satisficers, on the other hand, they choose an option that is good enough and they are statistically happier. So if you let a maximizer and a satisficer, let's put them in the same kind of room, experiment, whatever. The maximizer, let's say they have to choose hats. Let's go into the good place, Chidi and Agonia, okay? They have to choose hats. The satisficer will see a brown hat that he thinks looks nice. And he thinks, okay, I'm going to choose the brown hat and I can go on with my day. The maximizer will look at the color and what color suit him best. They'll look at the texture. They will look at the blend of the fabric. They will look at the price. They will see, I can go on and on. They spend so much time choosing because they want to get the most out of their options. Often actually, and they do make that best choice, they can still see potential in those other choices, and therefore they are not as happy as the satisficer is after choosing, because they can still see those other choices as valuable. And the satisfier can, of course, still see value in those other choices, but they are able to go on with their day. They are not saying, okay, I chose the best hat in that room. They are saying, okay, I chose a nice hat and now I have a nice hat. And they can go on with their day, you know? And it's just crazy to me, because sometimes when I have things I want to do and I'm trying to choose because I just don't have time, I spend so much time choosing, and sometimes I don't even end up choosing, that it's like at this time I could have done both. Sometimes it's really about taking action and not just about making the best choice, you know? And, we are always condemned to choose in this society, and that's just life, and every choice closes doors. And the art of life is to not let that stop you, and rather focus on the door that you did choose, rather on all the ones that are closing around you. Because that door does lead to more doors. You know what I mean? So when we look at existentialism by Sartre and Kierkegaard, they actually talk about this, right? Existentialism is learning to choose without paralyzing regret. Often people get soaked up into existentialism and they're like, why do we exist? And there is so much regret in the choices that they make and everything. But the key is really just to learn to choose without that paralyzing regret. Okay, you could still see the value in all of those other hats, but it's not about that. It's about being glad with the hat that you did choose. You know what I mean? And that, according to them, is the key to a fulfilled life. So yeah, that was a little psychology and philosophy part. So yeah, we talked about FOMO, we talked about the Renaissance, about satisficers and maximizers, and about existentialism. So I think we got a good overview here. But of course, where does all of this come from, right? Why do we think that certain way? Why is it hard for us to choose and to not just be happy with the choice we made, right? And therefore, we turn to neuroscience. So, that was just an amazing segue of myself. Yeah, we turn to neuroscience. So let's get into it. When we look at neuroscience, there are 3 things that I really, really want to talk about that I thought were so interesting. So the first thing is some research from Baumeister in 2011, and it's called decision fatigue. So as we saw before, there are just a lot of decisions out there. We make decisions so many times throughout our day that it can get a little much sometimes, even if we don't realize it. So what he actually says is that every decision depletes mental energy, a little bit here and there. You don't really actively realize it, but for example, you have these people these entrepreneurs, and they built their company and they love, trying to drive their company forward, and they're stuck in that CEO position. And you see actually when they are able to outsource their CEO and they stay on as founder, even if it's just partly, where they still have a say on on what happens with the company, but they are not weighed down by those everyday decisions that the CEO has to make, the company grows because they have their time and their energy and their resources to spend on the bigger picture. And while the CEO obviously is still, very much intertwined with looking at the bigger picture, they also, their chief executive officer, they have to make those executive decisions. Okay, you might think, where does this come from? But what I mean is that making a lot of decisions can be so tiring and can deplete a lot of your energy that actually, outsourcing them, when we look at the example of the CEO and the founder, now the founder is not weighed down. They have more mental energy because they don't have to constantly make decisions of the now, and they can focus on the future of the company. Every decision depletes mental energy. Having too many hobbies and interests and goals can drain your willpower. You have so many people who are like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to start with my glow up journey. I'm going to drink 3 liters of water. I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. I'm going to get a 3-hour workout in. I'm going to get my 10K steps. I'm going to study for 4 hours. I'm going to only eat healthy salads. The list goes on. And when you go from 0 to 100 like that, it can drain so much willpower and mental energy. Oh my God. I don't know how you do it. Like people like that, there are probably people out there who it works for. Probably, like they are utilizing some kind of alter ego technique or something, which is a whole episode on itself. Such an interesting topic, by the way, but I'm getting off track. Switching so much and making so many decisions the whole time can really drain your willpower. If you're focused constantly on making decisions and your autopilot, so to say, cannot do anything and everything is consciously decided, you are making life very hard and very unenjoyable for yourself. So that's why it can be kind of a burden to be very multi-passionate, because of those constant decisions. On the other hand, why then do we have so many things we want to do, right? And in one word, say it with me, dopamine. It's always dopamine, isn't it? Novelty triggers dopamine, right? We think of this new business idea and we're like, oh my God, that's such a good idea. Dopamine. We think, oh my God, I can incorporate swimming into my workout routine. Bam, dopamine. Didn't even do anything yet. We just thinking about starting something new, already dopamine. Doing the thing that's new is also dopamine. And, if you're interested in this topic, as I said, my last episode goes all into why we start so many new things and we can't stick them out and how to actually do that. So I do think that this episode actually is kind of a part 2 of that episode. So if you do want to get a little bit deeper into that and you haven't listened to the last episode, definitely go do that after you finish this one, hopefully. But yeah, what I just want to say is that a life spent chasing endless novelty can lead to addiction to beginnings. And we actually do see this. And you never get to that satisfaction of mastery. We never get to getting far enough. And if we always switch constantly to new things and we try to incorporate all of these things, we actually get nowhere, We get to be a jack of all trades while we want to be a master of all trades, right? So that is a little bit difficult to figure out, right? And thinking of all of these new things and these new ideas and whatever it may be, that is actually called, or that is done in a brain network called the DMN, which is the default mode network. So this brain network is associated with daydreaming and planning. Now, I don't know about you, but my DMN is constantly going off. And it can be great, it's a source of creativity. It's a source of, seeing life through rose-colored glasses, because you just see all of the beautiful opportunities out there and all the life that is left to live and waiting for you to discover it. But overactivation, fantasizing about every single possibility, it can lead to anxiety, which is already not that great. I mean, we don't want anxiety, but also disconnection from present life. And if you are a listener from the podcast, in a lot of my podcasts, I do talk about how important it is to be in the moment and to enjoy present life. Because, I'm not going to say it out of my perspective because I'm 19 at the moment. I have no right whatsoever to talk about this. But every single time I do talk with older people, and I don't mean people in their 30s, they're not old. I'm talking about my grandma, I'm talking about my grandpa, I'm talking about their age. Such interesting people to talk about, by the way. Old people, I love talking to old people. They have so much knowledge, but again, I'm getting off track. What they often say is that life goes by so fast, right? And you, all of a sudden it's over and you didn't even realize it. And so if we spend, I think you already know what I'm going to say, but if we spend all of this time thinking and fantasizing, at the end, what did we really do, right? If we didn't live in the present moment, if, for example, let's say it's someone's birthday party and you go out for a birthday dinner, and in that birthday dinner, you're just constantly saying, oh, I'm going to do this, guys. Or even just thinking about it like, oh yeah, tomorrow I'm going to start this new diet. I'm going to do all of this. This is going to be my next workout, whatever. And you're not actually there. All of a sudden the dinner is over, and what memories have you made, right? So, this podcast is not a mindfulness or wellness podcast. I'm trying not to make it one, but it's hard because it really plays such a big life in happiness. It really does really shed light on how we can be happy and how we can enjoy life and actually be there to enjoy it and not in our head in the future or in the past. I'm trying to make this, but I don't know. Every single time I'm just choosing a topic I'm really interested in, and it always tends to kind of be around this stuff. And I think it's because that is the phase of my life I'm in right now. I'm discovering myself and I'm trying to take care of myself. But, I think if this podcast goes on for years, when this podcast goes on for years, let's manifest that. Manifesting, another thing, oh my God. When, I look back in a few years, maybe I've had a lot of episodes about more fitness and nutrition based, because that is something I'm very interested in as well. Or more artistic and creativity based, or more, I don't know. There's so many things I'm interested in. And again, that's why this episode really speaks to me. And it already gets into something I will talk about later, is you go through phases, right? Right now, I'm very mindful, and I'm especially doing this in terms of trying to get to know myself. I know I'm young, and I know there is so much time to live, and I want to live that time, and I want to live that life with myself, and I want to live that life when it happens and not in my head. So that's what I'm really working on. And yeah, oh my God, I totally got off track there. But yeah, that's the neuroscience behind it. So yeah, next, this is not going to be that big of a section, but we are going to get into a bit of history, which is always so nice. So let's get into it. I need to find another sentence to say before I start a new section, because I always just say, let's get into it. But I don't know what else to say. I should brainstorm about that. Anyways, historical figures who navigated a multi-passionate life, because it is possible and it can be a very meaningful life. So before we get into how to actually do it, let's look at people who did it. So The first person I already kind of introduced, Leonardo da Vinci. He, as I said, the Renaissance man, master of all trades, whatever. He was not the master of all trades, believe it or not. He didn't master everything. We look at, he painted the Mona Lisa and he did all of these things. We look at his finished works a lot of the time, but there are so many products that remain unfinished that he never finished. His sketchbook is full of ideas that he never built out. And this is, of course, not bad. It's someone with a lot of creativity, probably didn't have the time to do everything, or he didn't see the potential in some of these things. But again, he didn't master everything. No one is perfect. And not every single idea of what to do with your life that comes in your head needs to be fully fleshed out and needs to be fully implemented, But what is very interesting, and I talked about this in another episode, having these multiple disciplines helped him actually because it created bridges between all of these disciplines. He could use his creative thinking from his painting in his engineering and come up with more creative solutions to things that weren't working, right? And his constant curiosity made sure he kept learning and kept improving. And so, a lot of people think of Leonardo da Vinci in that way. And I think we definitely should think about him in that way. But it's also important, especially when we are going to start comparing our lives today to his, that he did not master everything. He did have phases where he was more into painting or he was more into engineering or whatever. It's important that we see that even he didn't master absolutely everything. When we get into another, very important figure, Benjamin Franklin, diplomat, inventor, writer, that is quite an impressive portfolio if you look at him. How he took on the challenge of being multi-passionate is that he spent a lot of time blocking and priority setting. So again, we'll get into that a little bit later in the episode in the action-based part. But I'm definitely a Google Calendar girly, okay? My lately it's been better because again, I'm working on more finding myself and giving myself what I need and feeling what it is that I need. And so I'm trying to be less strict, but there was definitely a time where my Google Calendar was scheduled in to the minute. It had all of my meals, it had my study sessions, it had take the trash out. I'm being quite literal. I'm not gonna lie, I did get so much more done. I did notice that when I did not have... Okay, let me get into something really quickly because it's definitely something, and I've talked about this with so many people and we're like the same, so I feel like this could help someone. I love waking up early, but if I wake up early and I'm just waking up early to wake up early, I ain't getting out of bed. I am not. But if I know, okay, I'm waking up early because I have to be here at that time and I need to do that before that and everything, I need to get out of bed or I won't get it done. I won't be there in time and my schedule will be trash, basically. And my to-do list won't be all done. You know what I mean? If we don't, it doesn't necessarily have to be time blocking, even though I do think that it's such a good tool. If you don't want to go all the way into time blocking, having just like a to-do list or some kind of structured idea of what you are going to do with your day does so much, because you get out of bed and you have a vision, right, of what you want to do. That's also why I really like making my to-do list and everything the day before and not the day of. I'm not waking up and I'm like, okay, what should I do today? Because then I'm still laying in my bed, by the way, and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, these things, well, I could sleep for another hour. While if I make my to-do list the day before, I know when I wake up, okay, let's go. Let's start the day. I know what I have to do. I have a vision. I'm locked in. And I'm doing this. So, yeah, that's a little bit about Benjamin Franklin. let's be honest, it was more about me than about Benjamin Franklin, but I do hope you learned something. And then lastly, I also wanted to get into Maya Angelou, dancer, singer, writer, even activist. Again, a very fleshed out portfolio. When we look at, okay, she danced and she sung and she did all of this stuff, we see actually that she often immersed herself fully in one role at a time. There was a time where she was only focused on writing. There was a time where she was very into activism. There was a time when she was dancing all the time, when she was singing all the time. So again, she went through those phases and those seasons of life that we see, people are doing that, and I keep coming back to it. And it can be hard, to say that, okay, now I'm going to do this and I'm going to wait to do this. It can be hard. And again, because of that FOMO. Wow, everything ties back to each other. It's crazy. Anyways, I'm already getting into the next section. I'm getting ahead of myself. So those were the 3 historical figures I quickly wanted to touch up upon. That was the history part. And now for the most important part, if I do say so myself, we are going to get into some practical strategies, some actionable steps for you multi-passionate souls out there. I don't want to say it, but let's get into it. All right, let's get practical. So the first thing I kind of already said, so I'll keep it short. And that is have a seasonal focus, right? Dedicate seasons to different passions. Now you can either already plan this out for yourself. For example, fall is for writing, winter is for painting, spring is for travel. But try and have more so one focus. So when I started this podcast, I was very into a podcast and creating that. And now that it's become more so of a habit to record it and edit it and whatever, I have that energy again left over to put into something else and to enter a different season. And right now that season is obviously mindfulness, nutrition, getting my stress levels down, doing a lot of more so low intensity workouts and seeing how that goes for me. While I've also had seasons, especially when I started studying business, I was very like businesswoman, CEO, I'm gonna get rich. And then, I've had a season that I was really into my art. I've had a season where I was really into fitness and nutrition. And when I look at all of the seasons that I've been through, I still take every single one of those with me in my heart every single day. I'm still looking right now. I'm a little bit more in the wellness space, so it kind of ties into my fitness and my nutrition phase. But that knowledge is still with me today, right? I still know macro and micronutrients. I still know what my body needs. I still carry the art with me every single day. I mean, if you just look at the cover for this episode, I drew it myself, right? I still use that creative thinking in my everyday life, and I'm still able to look at things in a much more creative way than if I didn't have that phase. Oh my God. Didn't I say I was going to keep this point short? Let me get back to the core. Seasonal focus, dedicate seasons to different passions. You can either say this for yourself. It doesn't necessarily have to be seasons as in fall, winter, spring, and summer. It can also just be a few months, whatever. Or you can do it like I do, and it's a little bit more intuitively. You go for something now, and when that becomes, when that kind of lies down a bit, you don't stop it, but because it becomes more habitual and because it's become really a part of your life, you have some mental energy again to put into something else. And so that's what I really like. And sometimes you just feel that, and it's such a great feeling when you just feel like you're shifting into a new person, and not necessarily a new hobby or whatever, but you're just like developing. Maybe this is just like a young adult thing that I'm getting into. Anyways, let's get into the next point. The one big thing rule. basically what I'm trying to say is that every day you could prioritize one main focus and still allow space for those secondary hobbies without expecting mastery everywhere. So, for example, when I have an exam the next day, right? My priority is most probably gonna be my studies, right? And it doesn't mean that I'm not still gonna get my walks in or my workout. It depends on how hard the course is. I mean, you could still do like one or two, I guess, but it's important to prioritize. And it doesn't necessarily need to be every day or anything. You know, if you bring this into the big picture, we get back to those seasons, right? It's important to have the balance. On the one hand, not go fully into something that you leave everything else behind, but also not that you try and balance every single thing at once. More so having priorities and then those secondary hobbies that you're still keeping and you're still valuing, but it's not your main focus right now. Then thirdly, mindful consumption. Now I say this every single time, but you are what you consume. Food, media, whatever it may be. Not necessarily what you consume, but also how you consume. What you consume is also so important. That's a whole other topic, but it's also important how you consume, right? I feel like you have two kind of people in the self-improvement space. There is one person, and they have a list of all of the books they want to read, and they are constantly reading, checking it off. They are watching documentaries, they are listening to podcasts, and they are just, getting in so much information. Again, because they see all of those opportunities out there. But in the end, like, the absorption was probably more so wide than deep, right? There are also people who get into a topic or into a book even. Like, let's bring it down to the core. They get into a book and they read that book. They get really into that book. They maybe even read it twice. Who knows? But they fully flesh out the book and they really, really like what they're reading and they have really taught themselves something about the topic. It's all about getting deep and not just scanning the surface, especially when that is your priority focus, right? So my advice would be slow down, right? Oh my God, you don't have to read 3 books a month. You don't have to listen 5 podcasts a day. It's okay if you listen, for example, to one podcast, but you really listen closely and you get into the topic and you really learn, rather than seeing these books and these podcasts and documentaries and whatever it is that you're consuming, rather than seeing those things as something to stripe off your to-do list, right? So yeah. But again, when we get to that feeling of leaving other things behind, I would say write it down. And I'm a very big advocate for writing things down, right? Journaling, gratitude, all of that stuff. But you could have like a curiosity journal or something, or just like a note on your phone. And it's like a someday maybe list for future passions. And this allows you to honor your interest, right? You're acknowledging them, but you are not overcommitting right now. Because, for example, you really wanted to get into pottery, for example, but it was like 2 weeks before your exam period began. So probably not the best time. You write it down and, you go through your notes after the exam and maybe it sparks that interest again. Maybe you are an avid TikTok scroller. I'm not judging. But maybe you see all of these side quests you want to do. Just save them into an album side quest. And when you do have the time or when you want to take up something new, you have that there in order to inspire you. And so this way you don't feel like you're actually leaving those interests behind because you are acknowledging them. You're just saving them for a little bit later without overcommitting now. And then another tip I have is micromastery. Now, I'm a very big believer and a very big advocate for micromastery. It isn't for everyone, I will say that. When you are looking at one individual skill, okay, not at, the whole array that we want to master. When we are looking at one specific skill, it can sometimes feel like a lot, right? But when we practice mastering smaller components instead of larger hobbies, we can combine them a little bit easier, right? If you want to become an artist, let's get at the example. So you want to become an artist, you want to be able to draw people and animals and backgrounds, and you want to be able to draw nature, you want to be able to draw buildings, you want to be able to animate, you want to be able to paint in acrylic, to sketch in watercolor. I mean, I think you know what I'm going to say. Start with sketching trees and become really good at sketching trees. And then you can add a deer, through your forest. And then you can add a river. And then you can try different kinds of backgrounds. And then you can start adding in people. And you can really get into drawing people and faces and anatomy. If you know right now, my focus is getting good at sketching trees, that opens up a lot of mental space and time to also pursue other passions, right? So if you do have things you want to combine, this is a really good way of doing that. In the end, life is long and you do have that time, and everything does compound over time, right? As I said, I don't draw that much anymore, but even when I do draw, I often hear that I draw really, really well, and that is just because there is still something in me that knows how to draw because I spent so much time doing it. It's not that if you put something to the side right now that you lose it all and you can never get back to it, right? So yeah, I have one more tip for you, and that is a hard one. But it is acceptance. You can't live every life. The goal isn't to do it all, but to experience deeply whatever you choose. Now, this is a whole conversation, isn't it? Oh my God. The thing for me is that you can't live every life, but you also only have one life, right? You hear a lot of people say, oh yeah, I'm not doing this, but in another life. I'm not doing this, but in another life. And then I'm just like, you only have one life. Girl, if you want to ride a horse, go ride a horse. It's a very difficult balance, but I think what keeps a lot of people stuck is that they are too stubborn to accept that you are going to keep getting more ideas. It's not just the ideas that you have now, because the ideas that you have now, probably if you spread them out over time, you can get it all done. Probably, right? But the thing is, you're going to get new ideas. And then you can't invest in everything. So coming back to my mindfulness is that you can't keep living in your head, constantly thinking of these new things and that novelty and just going crazy on that dopamine and all of these possibilities and alternate universes. I could have said something else to my crush. How stupid that does sound. The goal isn't to do it all, but to experience deeply with whatever you choose. Again, getting back to what we said in the psychological perspective, getting back to those satisficers and maximizers, being a satisficer and being happy with what you choose is so, so important. So yes, I do want to add a little bit more of mindfulness to the conclusion. Final thoughts and bringing everything together into one piece, because obviously we talk about philosophy and psychology, and then we talk about neuroscience, and then we talk about history, and then, everything can kind of seem far. And so to bring that all together and to just laser off some final thoughts and to really get that discussion also going in your mind, I think is something very valuable. But I do always try to keep them short because a lot of people don't like to listen to the end part. So again, let's get into it. Okay, so to conclude, I wanted to touch upon that last part, and that is to live in the moment. Have gratitude for the present. I've talked about so many times studies that show that gratitude increases your happiness. Living in the present moment increases your happiness. And, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but, it reduces anxiety, about what we're quote unquote missing, that FOMO. Being grateful for what you do have can be amazing. I was taking a walk just this morning. It was actually so beautiful, and I was so genuinely grateful. There was like a lake, and there was a tree over the lake, and the light just hit it beautifully, and there were birds. Like I was in a movie, I'm telling you. And even though I might not have the capabilities now to move to a different country and to get into that next season of my life, I can be grateful for what I have now. And I'm not, even though I am sometimes thinking about the future and what I want, I'm also able to be right now and to be grateful for what I have right now. And I think that's so important. So being able to celebrate small completions can also do so much, right? A lot of people, it's kind of addicting as well if you get very deeply into a topic. For example, let's take art again. You've mastered those trees. You want to go to the lakes and you want to draw the animals and you want to, like, you have this vision, you have the momentum, you want to go at it. And I love that. But it's also important to look at those first trees you drew and to see how far you've already come, right? And sometimes it's, again, important to stand still and to be grateful and to realize what you did do. So you can do everything, just not all at once. There's, oh my God, what podcast is that? I don't remember the podcast this quote is from. I think it's For You from Eve, but I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it's Oh Let's Talk. I'm sorry. I don't know what podcast it's from, but it's a really good quote. So, credits. It's not my quote. But the quote is, I think you can do anything, but you cannot do everything. You can do anything in life you want to do, you can do, but you cannot do everything now. That is important. And that is so hard. That's so hard, but it is important. Life isn't about speed running every passion. Again, it's not about checking off your to-do list. It's about savoring and selecting and sometimes choosing depth over breadth, right? It's sometimes more important to choose to go further into a topic without jumping to the next one. So let your curiosity be a compass, right? Let your curiosity show you how beautiful life is and how much it has to offer, rather than, a bow and arrow and just shooting you to so many different places that you can't keep up and that it becomes frustrating and anxiety inducing, right? That was the episode for today. I really enjoyed. Oh, I missed this. Yeah, but I really couldn't record last week, sadly. But I missed this. So I will definitely see you next week in the next episode. If you are not yet, make sure to subscribe if you're listening on YouTube, or to follow if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It does really, really help me if you rate the podcast, if you give me some feedback with a review, hopefully a good one. Or even better, if you send this podcast to your friend, if you share it, if you think it could help different people. It can just really help getting the name of the podcast out there, because this is something that I genuinely love doing. And I have heard as feedback that when you listen to the podcast, you can hear me smiling, which I love that compliment, honestly. But yeah, for me, it's important that I can keep doing this, because it just brings me so much as well. And I feel like it brings other people so much value as well. So if you're able to just take a few seconds out of your day to give some love to the podcast, it would mean the world to me. But for now, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a lovely further rest of your day, and I will see you in the next episode. Okay, bye.